one president to another. It's not a Jubilee thing. It's not an ODM thing. It seems just a Kenyan political thing. Your thoughts on whether this is how other, politics in other jurisdictions play out, or is it a uniquely Kenyan thing?
In my view, Michael, this is a uniquely Kenyan thing. And it's because in our country, we've chosen to just be Kenyans and to carry our Kenyanness into how we do our things. And many times it comes with a lot of ushenzi and ufala, whatever that would mean in the context. But it therefore means that we are people who really do not care about what we say and how that plays into the kind of decisions and relationships that we have. Because if you were to look at other jurisdictions, Belgium, Italy, even UK, against other countries like The Hague, Netherlands, countries that you expect to see a lot of heated politics, but you never see it until when it comes to a level where you have policy-making decisions which take place at either the upper houses or within the various parliaments, where then people decide to take decisions against benefits of what they said during their campaign, promises which they made during their campaign times. When you come back to Kenya, most of these things do not even last beyond the campaign period. And it's because of things which we probably, for the interests of political class and our viewers, I would call them principal agency theories against coalition agreements. Principal agency theory means that you have one person who speaks for whatever coalition or whatever party it is. So in this country, for example, in Kenya, it would be the party leader who can make a decision on what happens. You choose to want to dissolve the coalition. You don't have to call people and sit with them. And this goes up to the people that we call party members, because here we have during campaigns, we see people talking, saying, oh, I'm a member of ODM or Jubilee, that political party, this but beyond that, of course, they'll show you the card. But when it comes to the level where you have very serious decisions that are supposed to be made, even in who is appointed into cabinet by that particular political party, the party members are never consulted.
Maybe just to pause you a little bit, Kevin, it seems to me that majority of the political party leaders get into agreements to hoodwink the followers and make them feel and believe that there is actually an agreement, whereas the truth of the matter is there really is no solid agreement. And as a result, when they fall out, it is the electorate that is left feeling the pain and bleeding, because then for the politicians, it's purely a game of interest.
And that is true, because for the sake of Kenya, it's even much more interesting, because we vote based on our last names and who the party leader of whichever affiliate party that I would want to be part of. And that therefore is driven by numbers, which is why even as we talk about Jubilee and ODM today, a lot of that discussion is taking place within the numbers that whoever or who is able to garner for the sake of gaining a political mileage. And so that therefore means that when we're talking about political agreements and coalition agreements, memoranda of understanding or agreements and whatever frameworks that political parties get involved in, the place of institutions, as you were saying earlier on, Michael, is very important, because even these members of these political parties also have their own leadership at some level. You have the youth leagues that therefore bring in the membership, the young people into the political party, and they have their leadership, which should be cut across at least 24 counties as per our political parties and electoral and even our constitution. When it comes to women leagues, you have women networks and members who are members, women who are members of those networks, who also should cut across the entire country. And so it therefore means that when we are making these agreements, it should be important that at least the leadership, there needs to be some principle of governance, which is the basic minimum of public participation, because that way it gives the people the opportunity to feel appreciated, they feel respected, they feel honored, and that there's something there's value which they add into these political parties. Against what we have seen in Kenya, where people would say, you have elected me to go and speak for you. So allow me to speak for you, even when it gets to the level where you are making very serious discussions. Michael, again, remember that the party which is elected into government becomes the government of the day. And so when we're making political party agreements or coalition agreements, it's important also to look at how that plays into the various structures of governance, whether it's the executive, where you have the president and the deputy, and the entire cabinet, how the appointments are being done, how the vetting is being done. Then you move into the judiciary, because yes, it's very independent, but under intergovernmental relations, we are saying that they are dependent and also interdependent, which means that yes, you exercise your power and your dependence as an institution, but you cannot exist on your own. And remember that in our country, we've also seen a lot of that playing within how the president even has power on who becomes the Chief Justice,
right.
How even the president has a lot of power on who are the judges of the Court of Appeal. In Kenya, we have people who are never approved by His Excellency the President.
So Kevin, what then would be the point of agreements between political parties and political leaders if they are not going to be honored, if they have no intention of honoring them? And that's why we're asking the question, should they then be legally binding so that at least there is the law? Of course, there's the argument that will they follow the law, but maybe for a starter, should we get to a point where we now have these agreements with a seal of a lawyer who now is going to make it that, you know, it's legally binding, such that if one does not stick to the agreement, they can look for a place at least where there's an arbitrator?
But you see, Michael, all those things exist in our political party frameworks. If you talk about the Office of the Register of Political Parties, you cannot form a coalition without registering a deed with the Register of Political Parties and also the IEBC. But the challenge with that is what we've already discussed, which is appointments into government, nomination by political parties, and then, of course, who you are, even if you are the lawyer. In 2007, if I'm not wrong, we saw what happened with ODM and ODM Kenya. And one of the lead lawyers in crafting that particular agreement became a nominated MP, and today is a sitting MP. And so, to a given extent, in my view, there should be, those agreements should come, should also give room for principles of governance, like we are saying, which therefore would mean that you have public participation, you have issues to do with transparency and accountability, you have issues to do with even monitoring, because then those agreements should give room to institutions within the political parties that are made by the membership of these parties, even the opportunity to monitor how those agreements are being run. So much such that, for example, in the case of Jubilee, which was also a merger between two parties, URP for the deputy president and also TNA in 2013, and it all collapsed into being one party, Jubilee. Remember that each of these parties also have their own interests and they have their own objectives of formation. So the members of these parties should be given some degree of say in terms of how those coalition agreements are being run, so that if there are agreements or changes that are supposed to be made, let the members of the parties have a voice that needs to be heard, because otherwise what we continue to see is that political, principal agency theory, where one person speaks for the others and it is seen to be the ultimate say of the political party and indeed the coalition party.
So are we saying that then a legally binding agreement would be of no use because it's already there and they still don't honor it?
When we have legally binding agreements and any member of the political party can sue by virtue of being a member, you can then be able to question. So you can take the party to court and say, we expected that as young people, so-and-so would be our nominated member for the Senate to represent the males, and so-and-so would be the one to represent the females, and that there would also be the opportunity for the party to listen. Of course, political parties and coalition agreements also have their own internal dispute resolution mechanisms, but in the event that all those are exhausted, then it should be possible for any member of the political parties to sue their political parties and raise concerns. And those can only happen, Michael, if we are able to inscribe those kind of opportunities within our coalition agreements. Unfortunately, we have not put in a lot of emphasis on how we form those coalition, those agreements in terms of what exactly is written in black and white, and then what does it mean to the members of these political parties and its leadership. Number two is what really is the rallying theme of these political parties, what I would call, for example, what is your theory as a party? What is the reason? What is your ideology? What is the reason as to why you exist? In other jurisdictions, we have labor parties that actually stand for labor relations, and labor unions and members of different labor organizations actually subscribe to be members of Labor Party. We have green parties in other parts of the world where actually members of the Green Party are people whose interest is either in climate change or ensuring that there is greenness in how we do our things, innovations, and of course coming up with ideas that can be able to drive the economics, the economies of these particular countries, are able to ensure that what the citizens are looking forward to is what the government is delivering. In Kenya, we have parties that say our ideology is social democracy, but even if you look at how they run their daily business, it's very far away from social democracy. And so what that therefore means is, as we form our political parties, it would also be very important to create awareness and educate members so that they actually understand the ideology of these parties, the theories behind these parties, and even the rallying themes, so that when we come up with a slogan, that slogan should really be able to relate to how we run our affairs as a political party. And then number three is service delivery, Michael, because ultimately you are the government in office. So people are interested in looking at how, if you say, for example, it's the Big Four agenda, that manufacturing is working, then young people want to see jobs being created through the various manufacturing sector formations. When you talk about housing as your second agenda, then people want to see people being housed, and that in almost half of the country you have building and housing projects that are coming up to be able to safeguard the higher majority of your citizens and people who voted for you to be seen to be getting housed. And this is happening in other countries. Closest home is South Africa, where we have ANC coming up with changing and transforming the slums into housing units, and people are being taught on what that means and they're accepting it, as opposed to Kenya, where people sit in a boardroom and they say, we are going to bring down this part of Kibra and we are going to send GSU and ask people to leave and then put up houses, which 3-4 years down the line, people say, we never asked you for houses.
All right. And I see we are out of time, maybe. So as we conclude, Mudhama here says it ought to be that way in an ideal situation. However, in the real situation, the story is totally different. So maybe with your closing remarks, Kevin, what is an ideal situation, politically speaking? Is it a legally binding agreement or a socially and morally binding agreement which people will honor regardless of the law?
Probably I can give it two angles. One is a social binding agreement where you're looking to be into power because of the numbers that your social capital will be able to guarantee you. But the second level is therefore the legally binding agreement, because you are going to be a party in government. And government is run through various instruments of governance. And part of those are laws and there are policies that you make. And those policies are actually legally binding. You can sue and you can also be sued. So if we are going to come up with agreements, those agreements should, in my view, the light at the end of that tunnel should be legally binding, because then you are saying that Michael and Kevin are coming into this agreement. Michael will deliver X, Kevin will bring in Y. And ultimately, this is how we expect. And if Michael fails in his part of the bargain, then this is the action that we should take. If Kevin does not meet his point of the bargain, then these are the actions. So there are those two levels, which is socially binding, where you expect that there is going to be the number of votes cast and counted that make you become a leader, and that once that is done, you have the first 6 months to be able to put a government in office, which therefore, in my view, should be a legally binding agreement.
Thank you very much, Kevin Osido. It's now 14 minutes to 8 o'clock. We'll have to wind it up right there. But remember, that question continues, and we'd like to hear what your take is on that. We'll continue reading your comments. And the question is, should political agreements in Kenya be legally binding? Should political agreements in Kenya be legally binding? For now, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, let's look at some extracurricular activities you can get involved in to keep fit, and most importantly, to keep yourself just sane, especially with this not lockdown, but restricted movement, let's call it, that we have in Kenya. For now, we take that